Arizona, August 1945. Dust hung heavy over Camp Papago Park, turning the sun into a burning copper disk. Katharina Weber stood frozen as two American soldiers approached her children, Hans, 7, Hannah, 5, and Emil, 3. The soldiers spoke softly in a language she barely understood, gesturing toward a waiting truck. Her children looked back at her, their eyes full of questions she could not answer, fear quietly replacing innocence. She forced herself to stay still as they climbed into the truck. Small fingers clung to the metal edge. The engine roared to life, and slowly, painfully, the vehicle carried her entire world away. Katharina did not cry. She stood there long after the dust swallowed the truck, as if refusing to move might somehow bring them back. But 2 days later, something unimaginable would return to her. Her story had begun 6 months earlier, in February 1945, when she arrived in America. A 32-year-old widow, carrying 3 children and a lifetime of fear, she stepped into a country she had been taught to hate. Her husband had died in North Africa. Since then, she had survived alone in a collapsing Germany, raising her children between air raids and hunger, guided only by the regime's warnings of cruel American enemies. She prepared her children for suffering. Silence, obedience, invisibility. These were the tools she gave them. She expected punishment, humiliation, perhaps worse. She expected monsters. Instead, Ellis Island greeted them with paperwork, medical checks, and tired officials who treated them like numbers, not enemies. It was cold and impersonal, but not cruel. Then came the train west. Days crossing a land untouched by war. Cities stood whole, fields stretched endlessly. Her children pressed their faces to the windows, witnessing a world that felt impossible. Hans asked questions she could not answer. Why was nothing destroyed? When would they go home? Katharina stayed silent. All she knew was that they were heading deeper into the unknown, to a place called Camp Papago Park. Camp Papago Park stretched across the Arizona desert, a harsh landscape of heat and dust. It held thousands of German prisoners, and in a smaller section, women and children trying to survive a war they did not fight. The women's compound was crowded but functional. Shared barracks, makeshift classrooms, and a small kitchen where meals were prepared from unfamiliar American rations and whatever could be grown from stubborn desert soil. Katharina and her children were placed in Barrack 7 with 4 other families. 15 people in a space meant for 8. Privacy vanished, but for the first time in years, there was no bombing, no hunger. The children adapted quickly. Hans made friends, turning scraps into games. Hannah helped in the kitchen, learning strange recipes. Emil chased tiny lizards, laughing in a world that still made sense to him. Katharina watched them and felt something she couldn't name. Relief that they were safe, guilt that safety came from the enemy, confusion about what survival meant when everything she believed had collapsed. In July, illness swept through the camp. Measles moved quickly from child to child, unstoppable in crowded barracks. Fear returned, not from bombs, but from something smaller and just as deadly. Hans was first. Fever burned through him, draining the energy that once filled every moment. Then Hannah fell ill, then Emil. Within days, all 3 lay weak, their small bodies fighting the same invisible enemy. Katharina did not sleep. She sat beside them, cooling their foreheads, whispering comfort, forcing water between trembling lips. Every breath they took felt fragile, every silence unbearable. The camp doctor, Captain Richardson, warned of danger, pneumonia, complications that could turn sickness into death. His words were broken through language, but his tone needed no translation. As the days passed, the medical unit became overwhelmed. Too many children, too few resources. This was a prison camp, not a hospital. And for Katharina, the fear grew heavier with every passing hour. On August 3rd, Emil's fever spiked violently. His small chest struggled for air, each breath a fragile fight. The sound terrified Katharina. It was a sound she had heard before, the sound that came before loss. She called for Captain Richardson, her voice shaking, words breaking apart in panic. He examined Emil, and in that moment his expression changed. Not fear, but urgency, a silent confirmation of her worst fear. "This child needs a real hospital," he said. Katharina understood enough. Not here, not now, not like this. If Emil stayed, he might not survive. Richardson acted quickly. He requested emergency transfer for all 3 children, not just Emil, but Hans and Hannah too. Separation, he knew, could harm them as much as illness. The request climbed through military command, layers of authority weighing rules against compassion. German prisoners, American hospital. It was not a simple decision. 6 hours later, approval came. The children would be taken to Phoenix for treatment. They would receive proper care. They would have a chance to live. But there was one condition. Katharina would not go with them. Regulations were clear. Prisoners could not enter civilian hospitals. Mothers could not follow their sick children. When the interpreter explained, the words shattered her. "No," she said immediately. "They need me." Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. She begged them to understand. Emil was only 3. Hans had nightmares. Hannah would suffer in silence. They needed their mother, not just medicine. But rules do not bend easily. At 1400 hours, the ambulance arrived, and Katharina was forced to face something worse than fear, letting her children go where she could not follow. Katharina carried Emil in her arms, his body burning, too weak to move. Hans walked beside her, trying not to cry. Hannah gripped her mother's hand tightly, as if letting go meant losing her forever. At the ambulance, everything broke. Katharina placed Emil onto the stretcher with trembling hands. She let go of Hannah's grip. She watched Hans climb inside, his courage crumbling behind silent tears. The medics were gentle, their voices soft, but they were strangers, American strangers. Enemies, she had been told. And now they were taking her children away. Through the back window, the children looked at her. Hans pressed his face to the glass. Hannah cried openly now. Emil searched weakly, instinctively, for the one place he felt safe. Then the doors closed, the engine started, and just like that, they were gone. Katharina stood alone under the burning Arizona sun as dust erased their presence. She returned to the barracks slowly, as if every step carried weight. Inside, 3 empty beds waited. Small toys lay untouched. The silence was louder than anything she had ever known. She lay on her bunk, staring into nothing. The other women tried to comfort her, whispering softly, placing gentle hands on her shoulder, but nothing could reach her now. Her children were somewhere she could not see, surrounded by people she could not trust, speaking words they could not understand. She was their mother, and she was powerless. That night she did not eat, she did not sleep, she only listened to the silence, to her own thoughts, to the unbearable question echoing in her mind. What if they never come back? 2 days earlier she had watched them disappear. Now she waited in darkness, not knowing that somewhere beyond the desert, strangers were making a decision that would change everything.